is Kenya racist? And I tell them, yes, it is. And Kenya is racist because it discriminates against its own. I am privileged. There are things I was able to achieve simply because of the color of my skin.
In fact, whites are economically the strongest group. The average income of white South Africans are vastly higher than black South Africans. This is the land of milk and honey if you're white.
In Africa, of course I'm used to people respecting me just because white man in Africa, and I recognize that I have benefited from white privilege.
If you want to see how the white privilege looks like in the post-apartheid South Africa, well, this is one of the images.
Never once in all my years of living or traveling on the African continent have I been mistreated in any way because of my ethnicity, because of my skin color.
I had held 2 positions already where, putting hand to heart, those jobs I got because of my skin.
Oh.
Because, and you know, very often when I go to Estonia or any other places, people ask me, is Kenya racist? And I tell them, yes, it is. And Kenya is racist because it discriminates against its own. And I am so very aware that I am privileged. I am so aware that I get favors. I'm so aware that there are things I was able to achieve simply because of the color of my skin.
And here's the thing that you're saying. It's not by people with the same skin color as you.
No.
It is Kenyans, blacks,
Yes.
being prejudiced to their own
Yes.
and choosing somebody else because in their minds, they believe that person is better because of their skin color.
Correct.
That is the height of the effect of colonialism.
Absolutely.
That is the epitome of it, where you think you're lesser than other people. You yourself believe somebody else is better on no other basis but on the skin color.
Yes.
Wow.
And so I was clearly aware that I was not the best candidate for that position. I just knew it's because they need somebody who looks like me.
Is there a white genocide in South Africa?
No, there's no sign of it, never has been. In fact, whites are economically the strongest group. They benefited from democracy more than anybody else. 64% of all boardrooms in South Africa are still white. The average income of white South Africans are vastly higher than black South Africans. No. There are better schools, there are better education, there are private health care. This is the land of milk and honey if you're white.
Has any land been expropriated in South Africa without compensation since the first all-race election in this country?
I'm not aware of anyone. Not a single farm that I'm aware of was expropriated without compensation since 1994.
So how do we interpret President Trump's executive order?
It is possible that South Africa has offended the United States with his policy on the Palestinians, and it could be that with his policy on Russia, the ambiguities of those policies and its relationship with the Chinese. It could be. I think that does play a role. But there was something very, very sensitive that was touched upon. And in South Africa, right-wing groups, so-called civil society groups, we know that they have access to the Trump administration because they claim that. And if you listen to what Trump has said, it corresponds exactly with the genocide narrative that they sell and that they market, and that whites are victims of the democratic system and the constitution of South Africa and legislation. So there's an overlay, there's an immediate overlay, there's an unquestionable overlay between what Trump says and these right-wing groups have said. So I'm afraid I have to believe them when they say they have direct access to the Trump administration, and we see it in what Trump has been doing.
Man in Africa, of course I'm used to being called Bwana or boss by people I've never met before. In Africa, Of course, I'm used to people respecting me just because white man in Africa. And I recognise that I have benefited from white privilege. I'm a white man in Africa. And I recognise that I have benefited from the fact that my ancestors colonialised, enslaved and mistreated people who are indigenous to this continent. I'm a white man in Africa, and I don't hold any personal responsibility for the way that my ancestors behaved. However, I am a white man in Africa who recognises that the position that I hold within society has been given to me by the fact that my ancestors behaved as they did. I'm a white man in Africa who recognises that the legacy of history has left its mark on the current. We cannot say that things happened hundreds of years ago and are not relevant to the modern world. Of course they are, because the events of the past have shaped the world in which we live today. And thus, economically, socially and psychologically, there will be differences between people which is rooted in the past, some of which are rooted in things like slavery, imperialism and colonialism. And unless we recognise, as white people living in Africa, that we benefit from privilege that is associated with this past, then we are ignorant. And let's not forget, ignorant means to ignore. That's where the word is derived from. So if we ignore this past, then shame upon us. And thus, as a white man in Africa, I have a duty, in what little way I can, atone for the sins of my father's fathers.
Hello from Cape Town. This is the Urbanist. If you want to see how the white privilege looks like in the post-apartheid South Africa, well, this is one of the images. In the most wealthy part of Cape Town, where predominantly white people live, right next to the beautiful ocean, exclusively black working class people are waiting to go back to their homes at the periphery of the city, who enjoy the city and who works for the enjoyment of those people is very clear.
We built apartheid, and now we're refugees. We took the land, we took people's futures, we took their dignity, and now we're being given refuge? What must it feel like to be a person of color, a black person in South Africa, watching my people who broke this country and now run off to claim victimhood somewhere else? We say we're afraid, but we built what we were afraid of. In 1994, we didn't give over power, we just gave over the mess and said, it's your fault, you deal with it now. But our white hands are clean. And now we're fleeing the country, crying reverse racism. So black South Africans, please tell the bad guy right here how it makes you feel. Because this is not right. This is sick. And I don't want to be the perpetrator anymore.
I've lived in 5 different countries in Africa. I've lived in Malawi, Botswana, Zambia, Morocco, and Nigeria. I've also travelled extensively in South Africa, Zimbabwe, Namibia, and Egypt. Never once in all my years of living or travelling on the African continent have I been mistreated in any way because of my ethnicity, because of my skin colour. And this is in spite of the fact that I come from a country who are guilty for some of the worst colonial crimes ever inflicted throughout human history. That's right, I was born in Great Britain. And without doubt, the British and the French committed the greatest atrocities across the continent of Africa. The Belgians have a good claim for the greatest atrocity in their treatment of the Congolese, but if one looks at it as an entity and the number of countries that were invaded by the British and French colonialists, one will see that they are the worst protagonists. Despite this, and despite the behavior of my ancestors, I have never been mistreated. In fact, I have been welcomed warmly in all of the countries I have lived in or visited. And when in Africa, I don't cocoon myself in some enclave dome which is inhabited by people who like to refer to themselves as expats. I hate that term. But no, I integrate as much as possible within local society. I will go to Shebeen. I will go to any compound and experience life as it is for people in the country where I am based. So whether that's in the village, whether it's in the township, whether it's in the local bar, I will integrate, I will mix, and I am always made welcome. Now contrast that with the way many Africans are treated when they choose to live in the United Kingdom or France or other parts of Europe. The difference is incredible. The everyday racism experienced by African people on the European continent is a crime against humanity. Now, there are different types of racism. The most obvious is the day-to-day experience that an African will have whilst living in parts of Europe. The name calling, the staring, the subtle discrimination. And for many Africans, they will just brush it off because it is so common that they just get used to it, sadly. Worse, though, is the institutional and structural racism that Africans have to abide with. The restrictions on their movements, the fact that most passports emulating from the African continent will only allow Africans to travel visa-free to a handful of countries. And most of those will be other African countries or countries in the Caribbean. And moreover, the difficulty that Africans have finding work in Europe is unimaginable. People who are qualified as doctors, accountants, lawyers, university lecturers, nurses, teachers do not have their qualifications and experiences recognized by most European countries. I know many people from Africa working in various parts of Europe as security guards or as care assistants when back home they had highly skilled professional jobs. But that experience is rarely recognized when they come to Europe unless they come as part of a transfer with an existing company. But if they come because they've migrated to Europe, their chances of accessing the sort of job which they are eminently capable of is slim. Now, if a black person was making this video, they would be quickly dismissed. They'd be dismissed as having an axe to grind or always trying to find problems. And again, that's part of racism. The fact that I can speak because of my white privilege means that I have a duty to do so. Not because I'm married to an African woman or because I have many African friends, but because I like to think I'm a decent human being who appreciates the value in every person on our planet.
So I grew up in apartheid South Africa as an English-speaking white boy. I only became politically conscious when I was already 18 years of age, because prior to that, I had been subjected to and sucked in this incredible propaganda of victimization of the white people, where every piece of news, every message we were getting, every joke, the butt of every joke was the stupidity of the black man, the inability of the black man to look after himself, never mind the country, to be ignorant, uneducated, break everything he touched. The messaging was that all violence was black violence, that all crime was black crime, that you had to fear black people. And a huge amount of that fear was that if we let them into the political process, into the governance of the country, that they would do to us exactly what we had done to them for decades. which would be to turn around and oppress us, to murder us, to take our stuff, to move into our houses. It was a very popular story that the ANC, prior to the 94 election, when it was still an illegal organization and Nelson Mandela was still in jail, and the armed wing was exiled to Zambia and Mozambique, Umkhonto we Sizwe, was that they promised all of our domestic servants that those servants would be given the house they worked in when the ANC ruled. And these stories were told amongst the whites to bolster our resolve never to let these black people run our country. And it was only when I became conscious of that from 18 onwards that I realized not only was this a terrible lie that was actually oppressing us as well as the people that we as a white nation, white minority, were oppressing, but that actually what happened subsequently from 1994 onwards was far more of a reflection of the nature of black South Africans than any fears we as white South Africans had been fed and believed, right? And I see direct parallels with what's happening in Palestine and Israel. We've been fed this bullshit of Israel as victim, of the Zionist government as defending, this idea that the entire Arab world wanted to wipe them off the map, when in fact, prior to the Nakba, prior to Palestine being given to Israel by the colonial powers, primarily Britain, many Jews lived very happily and harmoniously alongside Muslims and Christians within that region. They weren't oppressed there. They became the oppressor through the Zionist ambition of a few Israelis. White government for many, many years in South Africa needed the violence of Umkhonto we Sizwe. They needed the odd bomb to go off. They needed terror attacks because it justified the further repression. And I've told stories about when I was in the South African Defence Force in 1987-88, 88-89. The things that were done by the intelligence service to undermine the ANC and other liberation struggles and to pit black against black, to distract black people from action against the oppressive minority and the history of oppression. And it's time to step aside from what we've been told and look at the truth, look at the reality, look at the history, educate ourselves, and make a moral judgment based on our real values as a human.
I was just walking here, I'm like getting really fed up. It's Sunday morning, I just want to have a nice walk by myself. And the amount of people that say, hi, good morning, can I talk to you? I want to stop. Like, Bra, come. Like, Brony, come. Like, I'm tired. I just want to like have my morning walk in peace with myself. So sometimes I put my headphones on and I put music on, even though I don't want to listen to music, but it's just like I don't want to hear this always like tss, 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 like the Brony come like don't get me wrong, I really yesterday was like here there was always like something happening and people on the street, and it's really nice sometimes, but it can be annoying as well. Like for me, I'm like, now I want to just have my own walk in peace without talking to people, without like stopping and having small talk and stuff. Yesterday I saw like old men like playing games and just the children playing on the street, and it's really nice feeling. Like I feel so happy of like the community feeling that's here. But then on a Sunday morning like this, I feel also like, no, please, I just want to walk by myself. If you come to Ghana and you're a white person, you have to be aware of that. A lot of people want to talk to you, and a lot of people want to like have your contact number. A lot of people want to just like be around you. Something you have to get used to. And I have not come back long ago, so I'm like, in the Netherlands that doesn't happen to me, and here it happens a lot, so I just have to get used to it again.